The Darling Barka Geotrail provides an exciting, self-guided road journey through Western New South Wales. Here you'll find rivers surrounded by lakes, sand dunes, opal mines and national parks. The Geotrail is divided into 3 sections and can take several days to complete while enjoying towns and places along the way. Our Geotrail gets its name from Ralph Darling, who was Governor of New South Wales in 1828, and the Barkindji people, who live in this region, and whose name for river is Barka. This Geotrail stretches from Wentworth in the south, at the junction of the Murray and Darling rivers, 500 kilometres north to Peery Lake, on the Paroo tributary of the Darling. This country tells the story of ancient sedimentary basins and rivers, inland seas, gemstones, the earliest Australians and later European settlement, all linked together along the course of the mighty Darling Barka River. Along its route, the Geotrail includes stops at the junction of Australia's 2 largest rivers and at 3 of New South Wales' iconic national parks, Mungo, Kinchega and Paroo Darling. The region has a rich and ancient cultural history, including many significant places for First Nations people. At Mungo, you'll find the sites of Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, and information on how to reconstruct the last 100,000 years of New South Wales history. In and around Kinchega, you can visit the Menindee Lake Scheme, the historic Kinchega Station, and archaeological sites of Australia's vanished megafauna. Further north, at Peery Lake, you'll find springs fed through the Great Artesian Basin, hundreds of kilometres to the east and next to the opal mining fields of White Cliffs. The land in this part of far western New South Wales has been shaped over hundreds of millions of years by the character of the original rocks, modified by the tectonic processes of the Australian continent, and later sculpted by the evolution of river systems and climate over the last 5 million years. A series of sedimentary basins underlie western New South Wales, flanked by ancient, uplifted mountain ranges to the north, east and west. This topography forms a large inland drainage basin, where the Darling River collects water from the adjacent highlands and delivers it to the Southern Ocean through a network of meandering rivers with frequent anabranches and overflow lakes. The southern section of the Darling Barka Geotrail follows the Darling River and its valley between Wentworth and Pooncarie, includes a side trip to Lake Mungo, as well as a visit to the Pooncarie Bridge. Along the way, there are meandering and anabranching rivers, overflow lakes, floodplains and levees, billabongs, sand dunes, geological faults, ridges and point bars. At the southern end of this Geotrail section, you can visit where the 2 longest rivers in Australia join, at the town of Wentworth. Also here is the Darling Anabranch, an alternate, older course of the Darling, 460 kilometres long. This southern section of the Geotrail is mainly across some very flat topography, because here you're travelling across the ancient seabed of the Murray Basin and the old bed of Lake Wilcannia. Structural trends in the Earth's crust control the angular course of the river between Pooncarie and Wentworth and the higher ridge that separates the Darling Valley from the Lachlan Valley. During major flood events, these rivers fill their floodplains with wide, ephemeral seas. At these times, rivers also form and fill the many overflow lakes along their courses, like Fletcher's Lake, sourced from the Murray River, and Lake Mungo, an overflow lake of an ancient Lachlan River. The lunette dunes of the Lake Mungo shoreline record the changing climates of the recent ice ages. The sediments of the dune layers reveal their ages and the lives of the humans that occupied them. This lake has special archaeological significance as the resting place of the oldest known human inhabitants of Australia, over 42,000 years ago. Information about Lake Mungo is available at the Visitors Centre, and a discovery trail continues onto the walls of China Lunette and around the lake. Back in the Darling Valley at Pooncarie Bridge, on a short road across the valley, all the main river landscapes can be found. These include both eastern and western valley walls, the main channel and point bars at the bridge, and a network of abandoned channels and floodplains on either side. The landscape outside the valley is very different and consists mainly of dry plains dotted with sand dunes. These are the Wurrunan dunes. Originally active during an arid climate, the dunes are now mostly vegetated and stable. The red colour comes from the rusting of iron coatings on the sand grains themselves. When active, these dunes are up to 5 metres high and were an average of 200 metres apart. The dune sands of the Wurrenen Formation have existed in an arid environment for over 500,000 years and have developed extensive soils that now make up the resistant walls of the current Darling Valley. The central section of the Darling Barka Geotrail follows the river and its valley from Pooncarie 400 kilometres north to Wilcannia. It includes a side trip to the Menindee Lakes and Kinchega National Park. Starting at the town of Pooncarie, the geotrail travels north over higher dune country before descending into the valley to view typical meandering river landscapes of channels, point bars and floodplains. The highlight of the central Darling Barka Geotrail is the Menindee Lakes, a major engineering achievement where 9 large lakes help control floods, provide irrigation water to the lower Darling River and the Great Darling Anna Branch, and drinking water to Broken Hill. A tour around this area includes highlights of the main weir, the inlet regulator to Lake Menindee, the lakeside town of Sunset Strip, the connection to Lake Corndilla, Kinchega Station, and a return to Menindee via the scenic River Road. Near the main weir, you can take a guided boat tour of the river and lakes. The lake and river country near Menindee and Kinchega has been occupied by the Barkingie people for over 30,000 years. You can also explore the history of early European settlement around the original Kinchega station of the 1850s and follow the visit of Burke and Wills to this area in 1860. In Menindee, you can see the story of Australian megafauna that lived around the Menindee Lake 60,000 years ago and included giant kangaroos and marsupial lions. North from Menindee, you're in a wide valley with abundant anna branches and a range of river and lake landscapes to explore. The route initially follows the artificial Lake Wetherill, with geotrail stops to explore the origin of the anna branches, the formation of crevasses, and a path across an old point bar, before finally arriving at Wilcannia. The northern section of the Darling Barka Geotrail starts on the river at Wilcannia and then travels northwest to White Cliffs before ending at Peery Lake on the Paroo River, a tributary of the Darling. On this 210 kilometre journey, you first view point bars and overflow lakes around Wilcannia and the junction with the Paroo River just north of town. Then comes a journey along the Opal Miner's Way to White Cliffs, crossing small ephemeral rivers, dunes and dry lake beds as you climb 83 metres up out of the river valley and onto the Devonian hills of the Darling Basin. Further north near White Cliffs, the landscape changes again as you travel onto Eromanga Basin sediments that thin to the south onto the Devonian highlands and host the waters of the Great Artesian Basin. Northwestern New South Wales has been exposed to extensive weathering for 60 million years under mainly arid climates. This has resulted in widespread silkrete soils, forming a resistant cap over the marine Eromanga sea sediments and the formation of opals as part of the weathering and soil forming process. A highlight of this geotrail section is the opal mining town of White Cliffs, where hundreds of mines dot the surface. Here you can learn about the geological processes that form opals, fossick for opals or buy them, and take an underground tour to see the mining process. A guided tour around town is also part of the geotrail here, as well as a trip to the Paroo Darling Visitors Centre, where you can get national park information and see displays of fauna and flora. Continuing northeastward to Peery Lake, the geotrail crosses more ephemeral rivers with braided multiple channel styles, very different to the meandering Darling River. The final geotrail highlight is at Peery Lake, an overflow lake fed from the south by the Paroo River when in flood. Here, depending on the season, you'll discover either a dry salt lake with 400 million year old river sandstones, or a lake teeming with wildlife and water. At low lake level, you can visit the Mound Springs, where water that's travelled over 500 kilometres underground through the Great Artesian Basin bubbles to the surface, surrounded by rare plants and lush growth in this desert country.